Hello everyone, and welcome to Reading with Mrs. Adams. I'm Mrs. Adams, and today I have 3 stories and 2 poems, all featuring Santa Claus. The first story that I'm going to read to you is called The Night Before Christmas, and it was written way back in 1822 by Clement C. And it first appeared in a newspaper in 1823. And the picture that Clement C. painted of Santa Claus with his words is the picture that most of us get in our mind's eye when we think of Santa Claus. Now, this version of The Night Before Christmas is illustrated by Bruce Whatley. It's delightful and enchanting, and I hope you enjoy The Night Before Christmas. The Night Before Christmas by Clement C. illustrated by Bruce Whatley. For Ben and Ellen, may the spirit of Christmas be with you always. The Night Before Christmas by Clement C. illustrated by Bruce Whatley. Harper Collins Publishers. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." And that is the end of The Night Before Christmas, written by Clement C. Moore, illustrated by Bruce Whatley. Our first poem today, boys and girls, is called Old Santa. Old Santa. Two merry blue eyes, a fat little nose, a long white beard, and cheeks like a rose, a chubby round form, a big bulging pack. Hurrah for old Santa! We're glad he's come back. The next story I'm going to read is called The Polar Express. It's written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. I hope you enjoy this beautifully illustrated book, The Polar Express. The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg, Houghton Mifflin Company, Boston. To Karen, The Polar Express. On Christmas Eve many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear, the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. "There's no Santa," my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night I did hear sounds, though not the ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols, and we ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city, standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first we saw no elves. "They are gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "The elves!" Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no farther, we stopped and the conductor let us out. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of the large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and pointed to me, said, "Let's have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee, and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. He gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from a reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas." The clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared in the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said, but the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket." Signed, Mr. C. I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me as it does for all who truly believe. And that is the end of The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. Our final poem today, boys and girls, is called Santa's Reindeers. Santa's Reindeers. Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen, and Rudolph with his nose so bright leads Santa's sleigh through the cold starry night. Our final story today, boys and girls, is called The Mouse Before Christmas. It's written and illustrated by Michael Garland. These gorgeous illustrations were digitally painted, and the mouse in the story has a grand adventure on Christmas Eve. I hope you enjoy The Mouse Before Christmas. The Mouse Before Christmas, written and illustrated by Michael Garland. The Mouse Before Christmas, written and illustrated by Michael Garland, Dutton Children's Books, New York. To Katie, Alice, and Kevin. On the night before Christmas, there was a young mouse who was stirring and whirling all through the house. He longed to see Santa, that jolly old soul, so he'd stayed awake late and crept from his hole. Out in the kitchen, Mouse stacked up a treat, chocolate chip cookies for Santa to eat. He made not a sound as he hurried and scurried, but Puss was asleep, so he needn't have worried. Now on to the fireplace, Mouse gave a sigh. Though the cookies were heavy, he held the plate high. Next, where to hide? Mouse looked around quick. Snug in a pot, he could spy on Saint Nick. Mouse waited and wondered and almost dozed off, until hoofbeats and sleigh bells came from aloft. From out of the fireplace, bang, crash, and tumble, popped merry old Nick in a heap and a jumble. Mouse was delighted. His wish had come true. But what now, he wondered. What more could he do? As Nick stuffed the stockings, which started to sag, Mouse tiptoed near for a peek in his bag. Soon Santa was done. Time to hurry away. He snatched up his sack and sprang out to his sleigh. With a swoosh and a swish, Mouse was bundled inside. But down in the darkness was no place to ride. "It's stuffy! It's crowded!" Mouse started to shout, and he squeezed, wiggled, scrambled to find a way out. He soon spied a place to poke his head free, then beheld all around him sights splendid to see. He was high above earth in the winter night sky, streaking past stars in a sleigh that could fly. Mouse loved this new feeling, and when he looked down, far distant below shone the lights of his town. On to rooftops, down chimneys, old Santa did race. Mouse marveled the reindeer could keep up the pace. They soared past high mountains, skimmed low near a river. The twists, dips, and turns set his tummy a-quiver. Over bridges and castles and towers they flew. The rooftops of London gave Mouse a great view. Thrilling sights waited in each foreign land. In Holland the windmills by moonlight looked grand. Mouse had never imagined a world so wide. He lost count of the wonders he'd seen on this ride. Crossing cities and countries, over desert and sea, past the Sphinx and two towers, and Miss Liberty. At the end of the night, at the very last house, Santa peeked in his sack. "Why, what's this? A young mouse." Mouse was so startled, he feared he'd just squeak. But in Santa's kind gaze, he found he could speak. "Oh, Santa, I'm sorry for sneaking this ride, but your bag was so tempting I climbed right inside." Santa just chuckled. "Oh, little friend, don't you worry. Hop on my hat. You'll be home in a hurry." Mouse clung to the fringe. The wind chilled his face. The rocket-like sleigh zoomed and hurtled through space. Back home, safe and sound, there were presents for all. The one Mouse liked best was a hat marked size small. Then Santa crouched down till his beard touched the floor. The friends waved goodbye through the little front door. It was so late at night, Mouse was ready for bed, but he wanted to try his new hat on his head. It was just the right size, not too big, not too small. A hat just like Santa's. Mouse felt proud and tall. Mouse snuggled down, letting dreams fill his eyes, hearing words meant for him from a voice deep and wise. "If you do all the things that a good mouse should do, don't be surprised when your wishes come true. Merry Christmas, dear mouse. Merry Christmas to you." And that is the end of The Mouse Before Christmas, written and illustrated by Michael Garland. Thank you so much for joining me today, boys and girls, and I hope you enjoyed all the stories and poems about Santa Claus. I recently received some messages from some children who've been watching Reading with Mrs. Adams, and I want to send a special thank you to the Flores family, Abigail, Jonathan, Tatum, and Camila. If you send me a message, I will reply. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, you can do so by tapping on the word subscribe. That way you'll be sure to get all the latest videos, stories, and poems from Reading with Mrs. Adams. As we approach the holiday season, I want you all to remember that God loved you so much that He sent Jesus. And that's whose birthday we celebrate on Christmas. God loves you so much, boys and girls, so dare to dream the impossible, because all things are possible with God. I love you, and until next time, goodbye.